The Vietnam War left an indelible mark on U.S. history, claiming over 1 million lives and marked by the use of banned weapons. The conflict revealed a duality of images, from American heroes to actions that provoked resistance and came to symbolize U.S. military failure, U.S. ambitions, and the beginning of the conflict. After the end of World War II, Vietnam was divided into a communist North, led by Ho Chi Minh, and an anti-communist South, supported by the United States. This division was enshrined in the 1954 Geneva Accords, but tensions between the two Vietnams inevitably led to conflict. The U.S., seeing its role as the protector of the free world and seeking to prevent the further spread of communism, began to provide military and economic support to South Vietnam by 1961. President John F. Kennedy increased military aid and sent advisors to the region, a number that reached 16,000 by the end of his presidency. The situation escalated after an incident in the Gulf of Tonkin. In August 1964, when two U.S. destroyers were allegedly attacked by North Vietnamese gunboats, although the details of the incident were later found to have been distorted, the U.S. Congress approved the Tonkin Resolution, giving President Lyndon B. Johnson broad authority to use armed forces in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. By 1965, when the U.S. military launched a massive bombing campaign against North Vietnam, known as Operation Rolling Thunder, the number of U.S. troops in South Vietnam had rapidly increased. By the end of the year, it had reached over 180,000 troops. The conflict subsequently became one of the longest and most grueling wars for the United States, requiring the mobilization of more than 2.7 million American soldiers and causing the deaths of more than 58,000 Americans and millions of Vietnamese. Escalation of the conflict. The invasion of Vietnam was a military and political marathon for the United States, full of unforeseen difficulties and serious challenges as the war deepened. The number of U.S. troops in Vietnam grew rapidly, peaking in 1969 with more than 540,000 troops. This military machine, one of the most powerful in the world, faced unexpectedly effective and sustained resistance. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army employed guerrilla tactics and waged war based on local support, an intimate knowledge of the terrain, the use of a complex system of underground tunnels, the ability to quickly adapt to changing conditions. And Heimerel made the enemy an extremely dangerous opponent even for the technologically -1 U.S. military, a particularly striking example of unexpected difficulties. For the United States was the Tet Offensive that began in January 1968 during this campaign, which coincided with the Vietnamese New Year. Enemy forces struck more than 100 cities and towns throughout South Vietnam, including Saigon. The Tet Offensive unexpectedly demonstrated the ability of Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces to conduct large-scale operations and penetrate even the most defensible areas, which was a severe blow to American confidence in an early victorious conclusion to the war. These events had a profound effect on American society. Press articles and television reports from the front began to change public opinion, which had previously been largely supportive of the war. Visions of the brutality of the fighting, the enormous loss of life, variously estimated at between 1 million and 3 million people, including civilians, and the misunderstanding of the conflict's objectives triggered a wave of protests across the United States. The U.S. economy was burdened by military spending, which various estimates put at $168 billion. This led to inflation, lower living standards, and an increase in the national debt. Domestic politics was plagued by a crisis of confidence in government, which manifested itself in the Watergate scandal and the subsequent resignation of President Nixon. The Vietnam War exposed the limitations of American military power and revealed weaknesses in foreign policy strategy. These events led to a rethinking of the U.S. role in the world, fostered distrust of the government, and were one of the reasons for the War Act, which limited the president's authority to make decisions on military intervention without congressional approval. Thus, the escalation of the Vietnam War and its attendant challenges profoundly affected American society, economy, and politics, leaving behind lessons that continue to be studied and analyzed to this day.
Thank you for being with us. Subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories from the past.